Every startup is a journey, and like all journeys, it unfolds in stages. While no two entrepreneurial paths are identical, most successful ventures pass through five critical phases: the idea, the minimum viable product, traction, scale, and finally, exit. Each of these stages comes with its own set of challenges, opportunities, and metrics for success. What makes this journey both thrilling and unpredictable is that progress is rarely linear. Startups zigzag their way forward, pivoting and iterating in response to real world feedback. Understanding this life cycle is vital because it gives founders a framework to navigate uncertainty, to recognize what stage they are truly in, and to make the right decisions at the right time. Today, we're going to walk through each of these stages, not as rigid steps, but as interconnected phases of growth, each one laying the foundation for the next. The entrepreneurial journey is defined by distinct stages, but it's essential to acknowledge that progress rarely moves in a straight line. Each stage has unique success metrics, and each requires founders to balance vision with adaptability. For instance, in the earliest stage, success might mean nothing more than identifying a real problem worth solving. Later, success is measured by customer retention, revenue, or sustainable unit economics. But unlike in textbooks, real startups don't simply march forward. Growth is often non-linear. Founders might pivot multiple times, go back to earlier assumptions, or change direction entirely. This is not failure. It's part of the process of discovery. The real mark of a successful founder is not rigid adherence to a plan, but the ability to navigate uncertainty with agility. This is why we present the startup lifecycle as a strategic framework rather than a rigid formula. By understanding the five stages: idea, MVP, traction, scale, and exit, founders can better anticipate what lies ahead, avoid common pitfalls, and maximize their odds of building something that lasts. Every startup begins with an idea, but not all ideas are created equal. The best ones start with identifying a problem worth solving. This means focusing on pain points that are real, urgent, and affect significant populations. A powerful indicator is when the founder themselves has personally experienced the problem. This lived experience creates both empathy and insight, allowing them to design solutions others might overlook. But identifying a problem isn't enough. You must validate through customer discovery. This requires getting out of your own head and into the world of your potential customers. Conduct at least 50 conversations, not as a salesperson, but as an investigator. The goal is to listen, uncover behaviors, understand frustrations, and assess willingness to pay for solutions. Far too many startups fail because they skip this step, assuming that their problem is everyone's problem. Real validation comes from listening. The third component is to define your vision and assumptions. Write down your hypotheses about the problem, the potential solution, the size of the market, and the shape of the business model. These are not truths yet. They are guesses waiting to be tested. By documenting them, you create a roadmap for what to validate or disprove in the next stage. The ultimate outcome at this stage is a clear, validated problem solution statement. This statement doesn't just capture the essence of what you're building, it becomes the guiding star for product development decisions. Without it, you risk wandering aimlessly. With it, you set the stage for focused, evidence-based innovation. Once the problem is validated, the next step is to test your assumptions with a minimum viable product. The key principle here is build to learn, not to impress. Your MVP is not meant to be flashy or perfect. It's meant to be fast, cheap, and laser focused on testing core assumptions. There are multiple ways to build an MVP. One is prototype testing, simple mock-ups or interactive wireframes that show how a product might work. These allow you to gather feedback on user flows and core functionality without investing heavily in development. Another approach is landing page validation. With just a basic website explaining your value proposition, you can test real interest by measuring signups, clicks, or other signals of intent. If people aren't willing to leave their email, they're unlikely to pay for your solution later. A third method is concierge services, where you manually deliver the value you eventually plan to automate. For example, if your startup idea is an AI scheduling assistant, you might begin by manually scheduling appointments for your first customers, learning their needs before building a complex algorithm. The success metric at this stage is not revenue or growth, it is early user feedback and validation signals. These insights guide product iteration, refine your market positioning, and tell you whether you're on the right track before investing heavily in development. Traction is where theory meets reality. At this stage, the key question is, do customers actually use, love, and pay for your product? This is where you prove or disprove product market fit. The first metric to focus on is retention. For consumer products, a good benchmark is 40% of users still active after the first month. This indicates that your product is not just attracting curiosity, it's delivering lasting value. Next comes customer satisfaction. A Net Promoter Score, NPS, of 70% or higher signals strong enthusiasm, meaning your customers aren't just satisfied, they're likely to recommend your product to others. The third critical metric is the LTV CAC ratio, or lifetime value compared to customer acquisition cost. A healthy ratio of 3 to 1 shows that your unit economics are sustainable, that the cost to acquire a customer is far outweighed by the revenue they generate over time. At this stage, early growth channels often include referrals, niche communities, pilot programs, and organic word of mouth. Paid acquisition should be avoided until retention is strong because otherwise you risk spending money to acquire users who won't stick around. In short, traction is not about vanity metrics like downloads or followers. It's about retention, engagement, satisfaction, and sustainable economics. This is the proving ground where startups live or die. If traction proves that your product resonates with early adopters, the next challenge is to scale. Scaling is not simply about doing more of what worked before. It requires evolving your strategy to reach mainstream customers who often have different expectations, needs, and risk tolerances than early adopters. One critical element is building repeatable acquisition channels. This means creating marketing systems that can predictably and sustainably generate new customers. Examples include content marketing, paid acquisition, partnerships, and formalized sales processes. Unlike the experimental channels of the traction stage, these are designed for consistency and scalability. At the same time, scaling requires operational infrastructure. Rapid growth can break a company if its internal systems and processes can't keep up. This means investing in hiring, training, and building organizational systems that support growth without eroding customer experience. Scaling also involves market expansion. Beyond simply adding customers, you must differentiate yourself from competitors, strengthen customer success efforts, and strategically position your brand to capture a larger share of the market. In this stage, the challenge is no longer about proving demand. It's about managing complexity, building reliable systems, and expanding without losing sight of what made your product valuable in the first place. The final stage of the startup lifecycle is exit. For some founders, this means going public through an IPO. This path is typically reserved for companies with at least $100 million in revenue, strong growth, and market leadership within large addressable markets. For others, the path is strategic acquisition. Larger companies may acquire startups to gain access to innovative technology, talent, market share, or competitive advantages. These acquisitions can provide life changing outcomes for founders and employees while accelerating the acquirer's strategic goals. A third path is sustainable growth under private ownership. Some startups choose to remain independent, focusing on profitability, long term market impact, and creating enduring value for stakeholders. While less glamorous than an IPO or acquisition, this path can be deeply fulfilling and financially rewarding. Ultimately, the outcome of the exit stage is value realization. That might mean wealth creation for founders and investors, market impact through industry transformation, or reinvestment into new ventures that fuel the next entrepreneurial journey. What matters most is that founders are intentional about their exit strategy from the start, even if plans evolve. Knowing whether you're building for acquisition, IPO, or sustainability informs countless decisions along the way, from how you fund the business to how you scale it. The startup lifecycle is not a straight line, but a cycle of discovery, validation, traction, scaling, and ultimately value realization. Each stage builds upon the last, and skipping steps almost always leads to failure. The most resilient founders are those who treat this journey as an evolving experiment, constantly testing, learning, and adapting. From the spark of an idea to the moment of exit, startups are defined by their ability to navigate uncertainty. Understanding this life cycle equips founders with a framework for making better decisions, anticipating challenges, and staying focused on the milestones that matter. And while not every startup will make it to the finish line, those that do often create transformative impact, not only for their founders and investors, but for industries, communities, and society at large.